My name is Helen Maus, and I am not a woman you can push aside and expect to walk away quietly. For years I poured everything I had into my family, holiday dinners, babysitting their kids, covering unexpected bills. It wasn't for acknowledgement or praise, just love. But love wasn't enough. One day, my daughter-in-law looked me in the eyes and said, "We're keeping Christmas small this year, just immediate family." No heartfelt thank you, no warm invitation, just a quiet dismissal, as if I were nothing more than an outsider in the life I had helped build. I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone, her message hanging in the air like a slap. Immediate family? I had paid their mortgage for years. I had helped them furnish their home, stock their kitchen, and raise their children. But now, when Christmas came, I wasn't welcome. At first I swallowed the hurt, told myself to let it go. But the sting of their entitlement didn't fade. It deepened. That night, at dinner, my son cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Mom, the kids miss you. Maybe you could come by next week?" Emily didn't look up from her plate. "And while you're here," she said casually, "you can send the mortgage payment early this time?" I set my fork down too hard, the sound ringing through the room. They weren't just dismissing me. They expected me to keep paying for them, even after pushing me away. That was the moment everything changed. No more silent sacrifices. No more unspoken resentment. Emily thought she had the power in this situation. She didn't realize she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Call to action. Drop your city below. We want to see how far this story has reached. Michael's voice on the phone was strained, hesitant. "Mum, I hate to ask, but we're in a bit of a bind." I gripped the receiver tighter. Here it comes. Jennifer and Michael had just moved into their Lakeview Estates dream home, a house they swore they could afford. But I knew the truth. I knew the numbers never added up. "What kind of bind?" I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. Michael sighed. "Our mortgage payment is due and we're short, just for this month." This month. I had heard that lie before. Jennifer's voice suddenly cut in, calm, sweet, rehearsed. "Barbara, we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate, just this once." I exhaled slowly. Just this once. Just this month. Just one more time that I'd be expected to clean up their mess. And like a fool, I did. I sent the money. Months passed. The cycle repeated. Every time it was another excuse, unexpected costs, a temporary setback. And each time, I swallowed my frustration and wired the payment until one conversation changed everything. It was a crisp November evening. I had just set down a cup of tea when my phone buzzed. Michael's number. "Hey, Mom," he began cheerfully. "Just wanted to let you know about Christmas plans." I smiled, warmth spreading through me. Christmas. I envisioned twinkling lights, laughter, my grandson rushing into my arms. Then Michael hesitated. "So, we're keeping things small this year. It's just going to be me, Jennifer, and the kids." I sat up straighter. "Wait, I'm not coming?" Michael cleared his throat, dodging my question, but Jennifer didn't dodge. She took the phone. Her voice was sharp. "Barbara, we just don't think it's necessary this year. Thomas and Diana are hosting, and honestly, you wouldn't fit in." Fit in. The words sliced through me. Not family, not welcome. I had paid their mortgage for years, but I wasn't welcome at their Christmas table. Jennifer was arrogant enough to ban me, and still expect me to fund their home. She had no idea the storm she had just unleashed. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I planned. I poured myself a glass of wine, grabbed my laptop, and logged into my financial accounts. Every mortgage payment I had sent. Cancelled. Every auto payment I had set up. Deleted. Jennifer had made a mistake. A very expensive mistake. And come January, she would finally feel it. The morning their mortgage defaulted, Michael called in a panic. "Mom, did you forget to send the payment?" I took a sip of coffee. "No, Michael, I didn't forget." I stopped. Silence. Jennifer snatched the phone. "Helen, this is ridiculous. You can't just cut us off. What are we supposed to do?" I smiled. "Get jobs that actually pay for your lifestyle." Her shriek was delicious. By the end of the month, their perfect home, gone, their arrogance shattered. And me? I won Dot because this time? I didn't just refuse Christmas dinner, I refused to be their bank ever again. And it felt damn good. The moment I heard Jennifer say, "We're counting on that money, Helen," something inside me snapped. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling the exhaustion weighing on my body. Yet somehow I had never felt so awake. They were counting on my money, but they weren't counting on me seeing through them. "Jennifer," I said slowly, my voice sharper than it had ever been. "I am sick. I have pneumonia. I cannot work." There was silence, then a dismissive chuckle. "Right, because that makes up for everything Michael did for you after his father died." I stopped breathing. "What?" Jennifer sighed like she was explaining basic math to a child. "He told me, Helen, how you leaned on him completely after Robert passed. How he had to be your emotional support at barely 20. How he stayed local for college because you couldn't handle being alone." Each word felt like a slap. That wasn't what happened. I had held myself together for Michael. I had worked extra shifts so he wouldn't have to take out more loans. I had encouraged him to chase his dreams. And now my sacrifices had been twisted into weakness. I forced myself to speak, though my voice was cold now. "That's not true, Jennifer." Her sigh was even heavier this time, like she was dealing with a stubborn child. "Look, Helen, we all know you've been helping with the mortgage because you wanted to be involved in our lives. And that's fine. But don't try to use your health as leverage. Use my health as leverage. I had worked myself sick for them, paid their bills, skipped meals. And now they were implying I was manipulative for simply asking for a break." I felt my heart hammering, but my voice was deathly steady. "I'll talk to Michael tonight," I said. "Have him call me." Jennifer didn't answer, she just hung up. Michael didn't call that night, Dot, or the next. When he finally reached out 3 days later, he sounded rushed and defensive. "Mom, Jenny told me about your conversation. I'm sorry you're not feeling well, but we really need that payment. We've committed to hosting a pre-Christmas dinner for Jenny's work colleagues, and we've already ordered new dining room furniture." That was it. That was the breaking point. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the weight of 3 years of sacrifices pressing down on me. The extra shifts, the skipped meals, the home repairs I couldn't afford, the exhaustion. And now they wanted their mortgage covered while they bought new furniture for their party. A wave of clarity settled over me. I was done. I set my mug down slowly, letting the weight of my decision settle in my bones. "Michael," I said, my voice calm in a way that was almost chilling. "I've been paying your mortgage for 3 years. 3 years of sleepless nights, of putting off my own needs, of ignoring my own future. And now, when I'm sick, just for 1 month, you're telling me you can't manage without my help." Michael was silent. Jennifer wasn't. I heard her voice in the background, sharp. "Just tell her she needs to send it, Michael." Something dark twisted in my stomach. For years I had been an ATM, not a mother. But this wasn't my burden anymore. I took a breath, steady and powerful. "I'm not sending another penny," I said. Jennifer's voice rose. "Helen, don't be unreasonable." I laughed, short and sharp. "Unreasonable? You're right, Jennifer. I have been unreasonable. For 3 years, I've been unreasonable enough to give you everything. That stops now." I heard Michael finally speak, his voice tight. "Mom, please." "No, Michael," I cut him off, my tone final. "Not one more dime. You are adults. You figure it out." And with one movement, I hung up. That night, I sat by the fire watching the flames dance. There was no regret, no second guessing. For the first time in 3 years, I felt free. Michael and Jennifer could learn what it meant to survive on their own. And as for me, this Christmas I wouldn't be forgotten and used. This Christmas I wouldn't be banished to pay their bills in silence. This Christmas, Helen Maus was reclaiming her life. And I couldn't wait. The silence on the other end of the phone was thick, suffocating. Then Michael's voice cut through it, sharp and full of something I couldn't quite place. "So, you're keeping track? I thought you were helping because you wanted to, not because you expected something in return." His words hit me like a physical blow. When had my son become someone who could speak to me like this? I swallowed hard. my voice steady but fragile. "I don't expect anything in return except basic respect," I said, barely managing to keep the tremor from slipping through. "And perhaps some concern for my health." "Of course, I'm concerned," he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "It's just bad timing, Mom. The holidays are coming up and we have obligations." "Obligations?" I blinked. "Obligations more important than your mother's health?" He sighed, annoyed. I could hear the frustration crackling through the phone, his breath uneven. "Let's not make this dramatic." Dramatic. I pressed my palm against the kitchen counter, grounding myself, forcing myself to stay calm. "Michael, I'm asking you to cover your own mortgage this month because I'm sick." The line went quiet for a second. Then, "Look, I'll see what we can do. Maybe we can send you half this month." Half? After everything, he was offering half. I exhaled slowly, something dark settling into my bones. "Don't bother," I said, feeling a strange sense of peace flood over me. "I'll figure something out." When we hung up, I stood in my silent house, finally seeing my situation for what it truly was. I had spent years sacrificing, pouring my soul into a son who saw my generosity as an obligation. I had emptied my savings so he and Jennifer could play house in an upscale neighborhood while I ignored my own needs. I had worked myself into sickness while they planned ski trips and replaced furniture they simply didn't like. No more. This wasn't just unfair. It was humiliating. And I wasn't going to let it happen anymore. The next morning, despite my exhaustion, I made 2 important calls. The first was to my bank. I cancelled the automatic mortgage transfer. The second was to Grace Thompson, the one person who had been inviting me to join her volunteer group for years. "Helen Maus," she answered warmly, always delighted when I called. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" I took a breath. "Grace, is that offer to join your book club still open?" There was a pause, then a laugh of genuine joy. "Always. We meet Thursdays at the library, but aren't you usually working then?" "Not anymore," I said, realizing how light my voice sounded. "I'm making some changes." Over the next 2 weeks, as I recovered from pneumonia, Michael's texts became frantic. Where was the mortgage payment? Had I forgotten the transfer? Was there a problem with the bank? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I spent my days reading books I had neglected, inviting Grace over for tea, and calling my sister Linda in Ohio, whom I hadn't spoken to in months because I had been too busy working extra shifts. Then, on the day before Thanksgiving, Michael finally showed up at my door. His hair was messy, his face shadowed with stress. "Mom," he said as soon as I opened the door, "there's been some mistake with the mortgage payment. The bank says the transfer was cancelled." I stepped aside, letting him in, but he didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't comment on my weight loss from being sick. No concern, just panic about his bills. I sat across from him in the living room. "It wasn't a mistake, Michael. I cancelled the transfer intentionally." He stared at me. "What? Why would you do that?" I folded my hands in my lap. "Because I'm no longer able to pay your mortgage. I'm focusing on my health and my future now." His face darkened. "You can't just decide that without warning. We have commitments based on that money." My voice was calm. "Like your ski trip?" His jaw tightened, and for one moment I saw genuine shame flicker in his eyes, but just as quickly he rallied. "That's not fair. We work hard. We deserve a vacation." I leaned back. "And I deserve to retire someday. I deserve to live without working myself into exhaustion. I deserve to be treated with respect by my son and daughter-in-law." Michael raked a frustrated hand through his hair, his face twisting. "This isn't like you, Mum." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I've always been there for you, Michael, and I always will be, emotionally. But financially, you and Jennifer need to stand on your own 2 feet now." He stood up, abrupt, defensive. "Fine, we'll figure it out ourselves, but don't expect us to rearrange our lives to include you when you're being this selfish." Selfish. The word hung in the air, venomous and sharp. "Thanksgiving is tomorrow," I said, changing the subject. "Will I see you and Jennifer?" He shook his head. "We're going to the Parkers. Jenny's mum is expecting us." "Of course." "I see. And Christmas?" Michael hesitated. "About that?" His voice took on a rehearsed quality, as if he had practiced this speech in the mirror. Jenny's parents are hosting at their place this year. It's going to be mostly their crowd, their family friends. Jenny thinks, we both think, it might be awkward for you. Awkward. There it was, the final ugly truth. I wasn't welcome. Even after years of sacrifice, of paying for their life, of prioritizing them over myself, I didn't belong at Christmas dinner. I nodded slowly, my heart beating loud in my ears. Awkward, I repeated, tasting the word, letting it settle. Michael avoided my eyes, already backing toward the door. You probably wouldn't enjoy it anyway. But it was personal, it had always been personal. I watched him walk away, his car disappearing down the road, and stood in my doorway for a long time, absorbing the weight of 34 years of motherhood, of putting him first. And this was where it had landed me. That evening, I received a text from Jennifer. Michael told me about your decision. Very disappointed. Thought you cared about our family. Guess we know where we stand now. I read the words twice. Then, without hesitation, deleted the message. Jennifer thought she knew where we stood. She had no idea. Because tomorrow I was about to make the most important decision yet. One that would change everything. And this time, it was going to be on my terms. Michael's voice was sharp with irritation the moment I picked up the phone. Mum, finally! I've been trying to reach you all day. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the cooling cup of tea on my table. I had appointments, I replied simply. Well, we need to talk about this mortgage situation. The payment was due yesterday and we got a late notice from the bank. Yes, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. I imagine you did. He paused, as if taken aback by my tone. So, are you going to send the payment or not? Because if this goes on our credit report... I won't be making any more payments on your mortgage, Michael, I cut in, my voice firm. As I told you last week, I'm focusing on my own financial security now. Mom, you can't just... He stopped. Then his tone shifted into the pleading, manipulative sweetness I had recognized from his teenage years. Look, I know you're upset about Christmas, but that's Jenny's family's tradition. It's not like we're excluding you deliberately. I let his words settle between us, then said quietly, Except that is exactly what you're doing. His breath hitched. Jenny specifically told me I wouldn't fit in with the crowd at her parents' house. She didn't mean it like that, he argued. It's just that her family does things differently. They're more formal. My laugh was bitter, sharp. More formal than the woman who raised you? Who worked 60-hour weeks to put you through college? Who has been paying your mortgage for 3 years? Silence. Then he exhaled, frustrated. Mum, this is ridiculous. No, Michael. What's ridiculous is that you expected me to continue funding your life while excluding me from it. His voice took on an edge. Jenny says if you stop helping, it's going to put serious strain on our marriage. Michael's silence on the other end of the call spoke louder than any argument he could have made. He had no good answer. I let the quiet stretch between us before speaking again, my voice softer now. Michael, I love you. You're my son, and nothing will ever change that. But this relationship has become unhealthy. You and Jennifer need to take responsibility for your own finances, and I need to prepare for my retirement. His voice shot up in pitch. You what? Why would you do that? Because I was a cosigner, Michael. I couldn't risk my credit being damaged if you and Jennifer defaulted. We weren't going to default, he snapped. We just needed some flexibility. Michael, I said steadily, you withdrew $12,000 from that credit line 2 weeks ago. Was that for your ski vacation or the new dining room furniture? The silence stretched for too long, and when he finally spoke, his voice was defensive. We needed that furniture for entertaining. Jenny's boss is coming for dinner next month. It's important for her career. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. More important than your mother's financial security? More important than treating me with basic respect? That's not fair! His frustration cracked through the phone. His voice hardened. So, that's it? You're just cutting us off? I'm prioritizing my own needs after decades of prioritizing yours. It's called setting boundaries. There was nothing left to say. The conversation ended with Michael still upset, but I knew, deep down, he was starting to realize that no amount of pleading would sway me. I sat in my kitchen for a long time afterward, staring at the wall calendar, where I'd once circled Christmas Day in red, months ago, anticipating spending it with my son and his wife. The next morning, a text from Jennifer appeared on my phone. "Michael told me what you did. Paying off the HELOC without discussing it with us first was manipulative and controlling. We had plans for that money. This is exactly why we need space from you right now." I read the message twice, marveling at the sheer audacity, at the mental gymnastics required to frame my paying off a debt I was legally responsible for as manipulative. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the hospital to speak with Dr. Montgomery about my return to work. The pneumonia had improved significantly, but I still tired easily and knew I couldn't handle the overnight shifts I'd been working to cover Michael's mortgage. "Doctor." Montgomery welcomed me into his office, concern evident in his eyes. "Helen, you're looking better, but not fully recovered. Are you sure you're ready to come back?" "Not to my previous schedule," I admitted. "I was hoping we could discuss options for reduced hours." He nodded thoughtfully. "We could move you to administrative work for a while. 3 days a week, regular daytime hours. The pay would be less, but—" "That sounds perfect," I interrupted. "I've been reassessing my finances, and I've decided it's time to start transitioning toward retirement." He studied me carefully, then leaned forward. "May I speak frankly?" "Of course." "I've been concerned about you for some time, Helen. The hours you've been working aren't sustainable for someone your age, regardless of how dedicated you are." He hesitated, then continued. "And I've noticed that your son rarely visits you here, even when you've worked holidays or overnight shifts." A deep flush of embarrassment warmed my skin. Had my situation been that obvious to others? "Michael has his own life," I said, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. Dr. Montgomery's gaze was kind, but unwavering. "We've worked together for, 15 years now? In all that time, I've never seen someone give so much and ask for so little in return." I didn't know how to respond, uncomfortable with both the praise and the implicit criticism of my son. "The administrative position starts next week if you're interested," he continued, changing the subject. "Take the rest of this week to rest and recover fully." I thanked him and was about to leave when he added, "Oh, and Helen, the hospital's annual Christmas party is on the 23rd. I hope you'll join us this year since I recall you usually work that evening." The unexpected kindness of his invitation brought tears to my eyes. "I'd like that," I managed to say before leaving his office. The next 2 weeks passed in relative calm. I adjusted to my new schedule at the hospital, finding the administrative work less physically taxing but intellectually engaging. I started attending Grace's book club at the library and even volunteered at the community centre one weekend, helping to organise a clothing drive. Michael called twice more about the mortgage. Each conversation became increasingly tense, the reality of their financial situation setting in. Neither he nor Jennifer seemed prepared to make the necessary lifestyle adjustments. Michael's voice carried a mixture of anger and desperation when he said, "We might have to sell the house." I didn't react emotionally. "That might be the most sensible option," I replied calmly. "You could find something more within your means." His tone sharpened. "This is our home. We've put so much into it, and what would Jenny's family think?" I bit back the urge to point out that their obsession with appearances was one of the reasons they were in this mess. "Michael, there are worse things than downsizing to a home you can actually afford." He let out a bitter laugh. "Easy for you to say. You've lived in the same house for 30 years. "Yes," I said, my voice unwavering. "A house your father and I could afford on our combined salaries, with careful budgeting and modest expectations." The conversation ended with him declaring, "We'll figure it out ourselves," as if that hadn't been exactly what I was suggesting all along. I didn't hear from either of them for several days after that, which gave me time to focus on my own healing, both physical and emotional. The distance helped me see our relationship more clearly. For years, I had been enabling Michael and Jennifer's financial recklessness while being quietly edged out of their lives, except when they needed money. Then, a week before Christmas, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors, and when I opened the door, I was stunned to find Thomas Parker, Jennifer's father, standing stiffly on my porch. "Mr. Parker," I said, unable to hide my surprise. In all the years Michael had been married to Jennifer, Thomas had barely spoken more than a few sentences to me. "Mrs. Maus," he nodded stiffly, "may I come in? There's a matter we need to discuss." I stepped aside, studying the expensive cashmere coat and leather gloves he removed as he entered my modest living room. "Can I offer you some tea or coffee?" I asked, falling back on basic hospitality despite the weariness I felt. "No, thank you. This won't take long." He remained standing, his gaze sweeping over my furniture with the same barely concealed judgment his daughter had shown during our first meeting years ago. "What can I do for you, Mr. Parker?" He clasped his hands behind his back, adopting the posture of a businessman about to finalize a deal. "I understand you've decided to withdraw your financial support from Michael and Jennifer's household." The way he phrased it made it sound like I was abandoning dependents rather than expecting grown adults to pay their own bills. "I've decided to focus on my own financial security," I corrected gently. "Michael and Jennifer are both employed adults, fully capable of managing their own finances." His mouth tightened. "Be that as it may, your decision has created significant hardship for them. The timing is particularly unfortunate, with the holidays approaching and various social obligations to fulfill." Thomas hesitated, looking slightly uncomfortable. "No one expected you to work yourself ill, Mrs. Maus, but a more gradual transition with proper notice would have been the considerate approach." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I gave notice when I was diagnosed with pneumonia. I explained that I couldn't maintain the extra shifts necessary to cover their mortgage. Michael and Jennifer prioritized a ski vacation and new furniture over their own housing security." His brow furrowed. "That's Jennifer's version." "It's the truth," I interrupted, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. "I have the bank statements and text messages to prove it." Thomas shifted his weight, clearly unused to being challenged. "Regardless of the details, the situation is causing considerable stress to my daughter and, by extension, my wife and myself. We're hosting Christmas at our home with several prominent families attending. The last thing we need is for Michael and Jennifer to be distracted by financial worries." And there it was, the real concern. Not my son and daughter-in-law's financial stability, but how their stress might affect the Parkers' holiday entertainment. "What exactly are you asking of me, Mr. Parker?" I said, though I already knew the answer. "I'm suggesting a compromise," he said, his tone slipping into something more businesslike. "If you could resume the mortgage payments temporarily, just until after the new year, it would give them time to make arrangements, perhaps downsize, as you suggested to Michael." My stomach turned. And why would I do that when I've already made it clear I need to prioritize my own financial security? Thomas reached inside his coat and withdrew a checkbook. "I'm prepared to offer you compensation for this inconvenience." Inconvenience. The implied insult that my financial choices were nothing more than a disruption to their social calendar made my jaw tighten. "You want to pay me to resume paying my son's mortgage?" I clarified, wanting to be absolutely certain I understood this stunning proposition. "Think of it as a consulting fee," he said smoothly, uncapping an expensive-looking pen. "You temporarily resume the payments, allowing them to maintain appearances through the holiday season, and I compensate you for your trouble. Simple business arrangement." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. This man, this privileged, wealthy man who had never once invited me to his home, despite years of family connection, was standing in my living room, offering to bribe me to continue enabling my son's financial dependence. "Mr. Parker," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm, "I'm not interested in being paid to support my own son. If you're concerned about Michael and Jennifer's financial situation, perhaps you should offer to help them directly." He looked genuinely surprised, as if the idea of supporting his own daughter had never crossed his mind. "That's not how we do things in our family," he said stiffly. "We believe in financial independence." Financial independence facilitated by a 62-year-old nurse working overtime to pay bills for two healthy adults in their 30s. The irony was so rich, I almost laughed. His face hardened. "I see Jennifer was right about your attitude. This is precisely why we felt it would be awkward to include you in our Christmas gathering." I inhaled deeply, forcing myself to stay composed. Losing my temper would accomplish nothing. But it was clear now more than ever that I had made the right decision. Thomas Parker replaced his checkbook in his pocket with a sharp motion. Very well. I can see this conversation isn't going to be productive. I'll tell Michael and Jennifer they'll need to make other arrangements. That would be best, I said evenly. More disturbing than his arrogance was the realization that this was how they saw me. A resource, a bank, a problem when I refused to play my designated role. Not a mother, not a person, but an inconvenience to be managed and excluded. I walked into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and stared absently at the calendar. Christmas Day, circled in red. Once it had meant family, warmth, laughter. Now it represented solitude. For just a moment, doubt crept in. Had I done the right thing? Should I have compromised, eased them into financial independence gradually? Was I punishing them for excluding me from Christmas? The kettle whistled, jolting me out of my spiral of uncertainty. As I poured my tea, I reminded myself of the facts. I had worked myself into pneumonia trying to support my son's lifestyle. I had depleted my savings and jeopardized my own retirement. I had been explicitly told I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because I wouldn't fit in. No, this wasn't punishment. This was self-respect. This was setting boundaries that should have been in place years ago. Then my phone rang. I saw Michael's name on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Mum," he began, voice tight with frustration, "did you just refuse money from Thomas Parker?" So Thomas hadn't wasted any time running to him. "I refuse to be paid to resume paying your mortgage," I confirmed. Michael's tone sharpened. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for us? For Jenny's father to have to come to you like that?" I closed my eyes for a beat, absorbing the sheer irony. My son saw his father-in-law's attempt to bribe me as humiliating for them, rather than for me. "Michael," I said quietly, "if you're embarrassed, it should be because your father-in-law felt he had to intervene in your finances, not because I refused his money." "He was trying to help," Michael protested, "and you threw it back in his face. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to Jenny's relationship with her parents? They're furious. They're furious that I won't continue working myself ill to pay your bills," I corrected. "That seems like misplaced anger, don't you think?" "This isn't just about money anymore," he said, voice shaking. "This is about you deliberately ruining our holidays, our standing with Jenny's family, everything." The accusation stung, not because of the words themselves, but because I could hear the genuine belief in his voice. In his mind, my decision to prioritize my well-being was an attack. "Michael, I love you," I said, choosing my words carefully, "but I think you need to take a step back and ask yourself, how would you feel if our roles were reversed? If I expected you to work extra hours to pay my bills, and then excluded you from family gatherings because you didn't fit in?" "That's different," he muttered. "Parents help their children. Adult children are supposed to become independent," I countered, "and to treat their parents with gratitude and respect, not as ATMs they can access whenever they want." A long silence stretched between us. Then, with a coldness I had never heard from him before, Michael said, "You know what? Fine. Keep your money. Stay home alone for Christmas. I hope it's worth it." The call disconnected. I called Grace and asked if the offer to join her family for Christmas dinner was still open. "Of course," she exclaimed. "We'd love to have you. And don't worry about bringing anything fancy. Just your wonderful self." Then I called Dr. Montgomery's office to confirm I would be attending the hospital Christmas party. His secretary sounded pleased. "Dr. Montgomery will be delighted. He specifically asked me to make sure you were coming." Finally, I called my sister Linda in Ohio. "Helen," she said warmly when she answered, "what a lovely surprise." We talked for nearly an hour, catching up. When I told her about the situation with Michael, she was supportive without judgment. "It sounds like you're finally taking care of yourself," she said. "It's about time, if you ask me." I sighed. I just never thought it would come to this, being excluded from Christmas, having my son angry at me for not paying his bills. Linda was quiet for a moment, then spoke wisely. "Sometimes the hardest part of being a parent is letting our children face the consequences of their own choices. You taught Michael how to walk by, eventually letting go of his hands, right? This is just the adult version of that." Her words settled something in me, Letting go wasn't abandonment. It was necessary. Then, before we hung up, Linda added, I was planning to visit Aunt Martha in Pittsburgh after New Year's. That's not too far from you. Maybe I could extend my trip and spend a few days with you. I smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks. I'd love that. After hanging up, I sat quietly in my living room, thinking about the changes I had made and those still to come. For the first time in years, I wasn't arranging my life around Michael's needs. I was making plans based on my own wishes. I looked at my calendar, at that circled Christmas day, and grabbed a pen. I erased the red circle, and in its place I wrote, Dinner at Grace's 2 p.m. Not the holiday I had imagined, but perhaps the beginning of a new tradition, one built on mutual respect and genuine affection, not obligation and financial dependence. I stepped outside after the hospital Christmas party, my hands tucked into my coat pockets. The glow of city lights stretched above me, reflecting the sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. I had just accepted an invitation to the concert with Richard, just begun considering a future that didn't revolve around Michael and Jennifer. The idea was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. When I arrived home, my street was silent, the holiday decorations twinkling in soft, muted colours. I noticed Michael's car parked in front of my house. A strange, sinking feeling settled in my chest. I barely had time to process it before my doorbell rang. Insistent, sharp. Taking a breath, I opened the door. Michael stood there, face tight, eyes burning with frustration. Behind him was Jennifer, arms crossed, her expression practically vibrating with controlled rage. I didn't speak first. Michael inhaled sharply, stepping closer. Are you really doing this? His voice was low, dangerous. You're going to let your own son struggle through Christmas while you sip champagne at parties? Jennifer's lips curled into something venomous. You humiliated my father, she hissed. He went out of his way to help you, and you threw it back in his face. My heart slowed, something colder than the winter air settling inside me. Help me? I let my voice stay quiet, firm. Thomas didn't try to help me. He tried to buy me. Michael laughed, sharp and humorless. Mum, do you even hear yourself? You used to care. You used to put family first. Something inside me cracked. I stepped forward, meeting his gaze head on. Michael, I spent years putting family first. I sacrificed everything for you, and when I got sick, when I asked for 1 month of help, you told me it was inconvenient. Jennifer scoffed. Oh, here we go. The martyr speech. I ignored her, my voice calm, deadly quiet. You weren't there when I worked 60-hour weeks to pay your mortgage. You weren't there when I skipped meals so you could keep up appearances. You weren't there when I lay in bed too weak to move, wondering if pneumonia was going to end me before retirement ever could. Michael's jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. And now you stand here accusing me of ruining your Christmas when you were the ones who shut me out. Jennifer's expression flickered. Michael looked away, but I wasn't done. You wanted me to keep paying? Fine. But you would have kept pushing me until there was nothing left, until I collapsed under the weight of your entitlement. My voice hardened. Final now. I let go, Michael, and I'm not picking it back up. Jennifer exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Unbelievable. Michael stared at me, something dark and unreadable in his eyes, and then he said it. You'll regret this. The words hung in the icy air between us. I held his gaze. No, Michael. My hand tightened on the doorknob. For the first time in years, I won't. And with that, I shut the door.